For weeks, Iran believed it had won. Fast boats swarming merchant vessels, drone swarms harassing tankers, naval mines scattered across shipping lanes like a death trap, buried so deep underground that no conventional weapon could even touch them. An entire network of anti-ship missile launchers pointed directly at the throat of the global economy. And Tehran looked at all of that and felt untouchable. Then the United States dropped a bomb that changed everything, literally. 5,000 pounds of precision-guided destruction rained down on Iran's hardened coastal missile sites along the Strait of Hormuz. Not just any bomb, a weapon so new, so devastatingly capable that military analysts are still processing what its deployment actually means for every underground military facility on the planet. And here is what the headlines are burying. This was not a warning shot. This was not a signal. This was the systematic dismantling of the most sophisticated asymmetric deterrent system a regional power has ever built. And Iran never saw it coming. Stay with Dr. Elena.Harris. Subscribe right now and hit that notification bell, because what just happened in the Strait of Hormuz is not just the story of one military strike. It is the story of a strategic miscalculation that may have permanently destroyed Iran's most powerful leverage over the global economy. And the consequences of that single night are still unfolding right now in ways that will affect oil prices, global trade, and the balance of power across the entire Middle East for years to come. To understand what just happened, you first need to understand what Iran actually built along that coastline and why the world let it go unchallenged for so long. The Strait of Hormuz is not simply a body of water. It is the jugular vein of the global energy economy. Roughly 27% of the world's entire seaborne energy supply passes through that one narrow corridor every single year. Oil tankers, liquefied natural gas carriers, container ships, all of them funneling through a waterway that at its narrowest point is only 21 miles wide. Control it, and you do not just control a shipping lane, you control the global energy market. Iran knew this, and for more than a decade, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps executed a construction program along Iran's southern coastline that was designed to make that control permanent and unassailable. Tunnels bored 30 to 40 meters into solid coastal rock, anti-ship missile batteries concealed behind natural terrain, drone launch platforms embedded inside coastal inlets, underground communication networks running entirely beneath the earth, invisible to satellites, invisible to radar, invisible to everything. At the center of it all, a layered, sophisticated, long-range missile arsenal that had no parallel among regional military powers. The Noor and Qatar anti-ship cruise missiles mounted on mobile truck-based launchers with ranges stretching from 12 miles on the low end to 186 miles on the high end. The Abu Mahdi cruise missile with a reported range exceeding 600 miles, extending Iran's threat envelope far beyond the Strait and deep into the Arabian Sea. The Hormuz 2 and Gulf anti-ship ballistic missiles, both equipped with satellite-assisted guidance systems capable of tracking and striking moving ships at ranges exceeding 180 miles. This was not a collection of weapons. It was a system, a layered, redundant, deeply buried system designed to make the entire Strait of Hormuz and its surrounding waters a no-go zone for any vessel Iran chose to target. Military strategists call the doctrine behind it anti-access area denial. The logic is elegant in its simplicity. You do not need to defeat an enemy navy in open ocean combat if you can make the waters near your coastline so lethally dangerous that no navy dares enter. You do not need to fire a single missile if the credible threat of firing one is enough to shape every diplomatic conversation and every military calculation your adversaries make about the Gulf. For 2 decades, that strategy worked with extraordinary effectiveness. It gave Iran leverage that vastly exceeded its conventional military capabilities. The Strait of Hormuz was Tehran's ultimate insurance policy, the card no opponent could afford to force. Then came February 28, 2026. Operation Epic Fury began, and Iran played that card. Here is what Iran's blockade strategy actually looked like in practice and why it was working. Speedboats armed with sea-skimming missiles darting in and out of the strait, targeting merchant vessels at every opportunity. Naval mines scattered across shipping lanes, turning every transit into a gamble with cargo and crew. Drone swarms launched to harass, intimidate, and in some cases, strike ships that dared to attempt the passage. And sitting behind all of it, like the ultimate backstop, the network of land-based anti-ship missiles buried deep in Iran's coastal rock. The results were catastrophic for global commerce almost immediately. Before this conflict began, the Strait was seeing more than 100 vessels per day making the transit. After Iran officially declared the Strait closed on March 2nd and began systematically attacking merchant shipping, that number collapsed to barely 3 or 4 ships per day. 3 or 4 out of over 100. Oil prices spiked above $100 per barrel, a rise of more than 40% from the sub-$70 levels where crude had been trading before the conflict began. At least 20 ships were attacked in or near the Strait. Shipping insurance premiums exploded from fractional percentages of vessel value to levels where, by early March, no major insurer would cover the passage at any price. Iran's theory was straightforward. Keep the pressure on, keep the Strait closed, make the economic pain loud enough and prolonged enough that Washington would eventually blink, back down, and call off Operation Epic Fury entirely. For a while, that theory appeared to be working. But here is where Iran miscalculated badly. Not all threats in the Strait are created in demi. Iran's fast boats are dangerous, no question, but they are manageable. The United States deployed A-10 Warthog attack aircraft specifically to hunt those boats in real time. The Warthog is one of the most fearsome close air support platforms ever built, and it is extraordinarily effective at finding and destroying small surface targets. As long as American air power maintains presence over the Strait, the fast boat threat can be contained. Make sure you are subscribed to Dr. Elena.Harris, because what comes next reveals the weapon that changed everything, and why Iran's underground missile network was not the sanctuary it believed it was. They are not sitting ducks waiting to be photographed by satellites and destroyed on demand. And the facilities housing them are buried so deep into coastal mountains that conventional bombs and cruise missiles simply cannot reach them. The physics do not work. Even many of America's existing bunker bust munitions lack the penetrating power to defeat the deepest and most heavily reinforced of Iran's coastal installations. Iran understood this. It had spent decades building and expanding its underground military network precisely because it knew that air superiority would belong to its adversaries in any future conflict. If you cannot protect your assets above ground, you go below ground. Simple, effective, and until recently, largely successful. The only way to genuinely solve the problem is not to intercept the missiles after they launch. It is to destroy the launchers before they can ever fire. Eliminate the source. Remove the threat permanently. That is what the United States set out to do on March the 17th. And that is where the GBU-72 enters the story. The GBU-72, Advanced 5,000-pound Penetrator, let that weight settle for a moment, 5,000 pounds, more than 2 metric tons of precision-guided destruction. But the GBU-72 was not designed to destroy what it lands on. It was designed to destroy what lies beneath. The warhead does not detonate on impact. It drives through earth, rock, and reinforced concrete using raw kinetic energy and a hardened penetrating body, traveling deep underground before the warhead fires. It combines a BLU-138B penetrating warhead with a guidance package based on the Joint Direct Attack Munition System, pairing GPS positioning with inertial navigation. That guidance suite allows the bomb to be released from standoff distances, meaning pilots can stay well outside the effective range of Iran's remaining air defense systems while still placing their weapons precisely on target. The explosive fill inside the warhead is equally significant. The GBU-72 uses the same combination of AFX-757 and PBXN-109 explosive compounds found inside America's 30,000-pound Massive Ordnance Penetrator, the largest bunker-bust bomb in the American arsenal. Engineers chose to replicate that exact proven formula. And it strongly suggests these specific compounds have demonstrated superior performance against hardened underground structures in testing. The Gabu-72 was developed to replace the Gabu-28, a weapon that first entered service in 1991 during the Gulf War. The Gabu-28 can punch through approximately 15 feet of reinforced concrete and roughly 150 feet of compacted earth. That was impressive in 1991. But Iran's adversaries have not been standing still. The underground facilities Tehran and other regional powers have constructed over the past 3 decades have grown deeper, more reinforced, and more sophisticated. The old bunker buster had not kept pace. The Gabu-72 is the answer to that problem, and given its design, its explosive combination, and its developmental purpose, Iran's underground missile installations along the Hormuz coast were facing a weapon they were simply not built to withstand. But here is the part that makes this weapon genuinely devious in how it is being employed. You do not actually need to destroy an underground bunker to render it completely useless. An underground facility, no matter how deep and no matter how reinforced, still needs ways in and ways out. It needs tunnels connecting to the surface. It needs access points through which equipment, personnel, and missile launchers can enter and exit. Block those entrances, collapse those tunnels, seal those access points, and whatever is inside the bunker becomes irrelevant. It does not matter how well protected the launcher is if it can never get out to fire. The bunker becomes a tomb instead of a fortress. That is precisely the strategy the United States executed along the Strait of Hormuz coast. It did not necessarily need to reach the deepest point of every underground facility. It needed to destroy the infrastructure that makes those facilities functional. And the Gabu-72, with its combination of penetrating power and precision guidance, is exceptionally well suited to exactly that task. Now, here is where the story gets an important twist that most coverage is glossing over entirely. Was March 17, 2026, actually the Gabu-72's combat debut? Retired Marine intelligence officer and national security analyst Hal Kempfer, speaking publicly about the strikes, stated plainly that as far as he was aware, this represented the first ever operational deployment of the Gabu-72. Military aviation publication The Aviationist reached the same conclusion independently. But respected defense outlet The War Zone raised a complicating data point. It referenced a report from May 2024 in which 3 unnamed U.S. officials told a major news network that the Gabu-72 had already been deployed against Houthi targets in Yemen. The context there matters enormously. The Houthis had been running their own campaign against commercial shipping in the Red Sea, targeting vessels in a key global waterway to create economic disruption. Sound familiar? It should, because the Houthis are not just any group. They are widely understood to be a proxy force, backed, armed, and directed by Tehran. They are, in a very real sense, an extension of Iranian power projection. If the 2024 reports are accurate, what that means is that Iran already had indirect exposure to the Gabu-72. Its own proxy forces were on the receiving end of this weapon nearly 2 years before Iranian soil was struck directly. And they could not stop it then. They definitely could not stop it now. So how did the United States actually deliver these weapons? Because this is where the scale of the operation becomes genuinely remarkable. Current analysis points to the B-1 Lancer bomber forward deployed to RAF Fairford in the United Kingdom as the most likely primary delivery platform. Here's why that conclusion makes operational sense. Each B-1 Lancer is capable of carrying up to 12 Gabu-72s on external pylons. By contrast, an F-15E Strike Eagle can carry just a single Gabu-72 per aircraft. Current estimates suggest the United States may have deployed close to 50 of these bombs during the strikes. If that number is accurate, you simply cannot achieve that volume of firepower efficiently using F-15Es alone. You need the B-1s. The math is straightforward. 4 B-1 Lancers, each carrying 12 Gabu-72s, accounts for 48 bombs delivered by 4 airframes. Devastating payload, minimal number of aircraft exposed to any residual Iranian air defenses. And about those air defenses, according to research from the Almar Research and Education Center, the combined effects of Operation Epic Fury and Israel's parallel Operation Roaring Lion have eliminated roughly 85% of Iran's integrated air defense network, What remains are fragmented, isolated pockets of capability, posing a significantly reduced threat to high-performance modern aircraft operating at standoff distances. F-15E Strike Eagles are assessed to have participated in the operation in a supporting capacity, potentially delivering initial precision strikes ahead of the main wave or conducting follow-up attacks once primary installations were already degraded. The two platforms working in combination would maximize both the speed and the lethality of the overall strike package. U.S. Central Command confirmed the strikes publicly on the evening of March 17th. The statement was precise, deliberate, and measured in its implications. Forces had successfully deployed multiple 5,000-pound deep penetrator munitions against hardened Iranian missile sites along Iran's coastline near the Strait of Hormuz. The anti-ship cruise missiles housed in those sites no longer posed a risk to international shipping. CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper made the American position unmistakably clear in public statements following the strikes. American forces remain focused on eliminating every element of Iran's threat to free navigation in the strait. Pilots are actively hunting targets in real time. The operation will not stop until those threats are gone. President Trump added an explicit ultimatum on top of that operational posture. Iran had 48 hours to reopen the strait to all international shipping or face strikes against the domestic power infrastructure that keeps electricity flowing throughout the country. Iran's response revealed a regime caught between its desire to project defiance and its growing awareness that the situation is deteriorating rapidly. On one hand, Iran's government spokesperson issued a fiery public threat. Any strikes on Iranian power plants would trigger retaliatory attacks against energy infrastructure across the entire region. Gulf states, including Saudi Arabia and the UAE, were explicitly named in that warning. The message was designed to tell Washington that escalation would not be contained to Iran alone. On the other hand, Iran simultaneously announced it would allow all ships except those deemed enemy-linked to pass through the strait. That is a significant departure from the near total interdiction posture it had been maintaining for weeks. Whether it amounts to genuine de-escalation or a tactical retreat designed to relieve pressure while Iran regroups remains the central unanswered question. The definition of enemy-linked is doing a lot of work in that announcement. American vessels obviously fall into that category. But what about ships from NATO-allied nations? What about vessels owned by companies that do business in the United States? The ambiguity is deliberate. It leaves Iran considerable room to continue selective targeting while claiming partial compliance with international demands. The next several days of shipping data through the strait will reveal more than any official statement from either side. And the diplomatic picture surrounding this conflict has fractures that will outlast the military campaign by years. Days before the Hormuz strikes, Trump reached out urgently to European and Asian partners with a historic request: a multinational naval coalition under NATO authority to keep the strait open. Nations whose own economies depended directly and immediately on unobstructed passage through that waterway. The response was a refusal that reverberated through every diplomatic capital on earth. Germany declared the conflict was not its war. Spain closed diplomatic doors entirely. France, which operates the largest European naval presence in the region with the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle and more than 10 accompanying vessels across the eastern Mediterranean and Red Sea, announced those assets would remain exclusively defensive. Not one additional ship redirected to Hormuz operations. Trump told reporters from the Oval Office that NATO was making a very foolish mistake. Beijing, receiving roughly a third of its petroleum through the strait in 2024, sheltered behind calculated neutrality. Despite its enormous economic stake in the waterway's reopening, Russia watched rising crude prices with composure. Every dollar added to the oil price fills Moscow's treasury. Russia and China then vetoed the UN Security Council resolution on April 7th, calling for multilateral military force to reopen the strait. As a geopolitical signal, it was unmistakable. This conflict now carries the shape of a great power confrontation, fought through proxies, vetoes, and strategic positioning. Only India moved differently. New Delhi deployed more than half a dozen warships to escort its tankers through the escalating threat environment, breaking ranks with the broader silence from Asian capitals. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has since publicly indicated that alliance members are actively working to determine how they can contribute to stabilizing the strait situation. A grouping of 7 U.S. allies has reportedly signaled willingness to join a Hormuz patrol mission, though firm commitments have not yet materialized and the timeline remains unclear. There is also an unexpected development worth watching. Ukrainian interceptor drone technology is reportedly being made available to support American and Gulf state forces in countering Iran's remaining aerial threats in the region, a collaboration that would have been nearly impossible to predict when this conflict began, and one that reflects how rapidly the entire strategic landscape is shifting. Meanwhile, Israel has been watching the GBU-72's performance with extraordinary attention. There is a reason Israel has been actively seeking to acquire this specific weapon from the United States. Iran's underground nuclear and military facilities have long been the central concern in Israeli strategic planning. The GBU-72's demonstrated ability to defeat hardened underground targets will factor heavily into calculations in Tel Aviv about what becomes possible next and when. The B-1 Lancers remain on standby at RAF Fairford. American intelligence assets are almost certainly cataloging additional missile launch sites and hardened facilities along the Hormuz coast that survived the initial wave of strikes. The infrastructure for follow-on operations is fully in place and being actively maintained. This is not a force that is stood down. This is a force that is ready to go again. Here is where everything stands right now and what it actually means. Iran spent years building an underground missile network along the Strait of Hormuz. It invested enormous resources into burying its launchers deep enough that no adversary could reach them. It watched oil prices spike past $100 per barrel and believed it had found the leverage needed to force Washington to back down. Every part of that calculation has now been challenged by a single weapon that Iran's engineers apparently did not fully account for when they designed their underground facilities. It does not care about compacted earth. It does not care about mountainsides or tunnel depth or how long it took to build the facility it is aimed at. It penetrates. It reaches the target. It detonates. The tunnels collapse.